Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that is certain to get your levels of excitement to the levels that nobody has ever even seen before, because we're talking about stacked column charts. And that's not it. We're going to kick it up a few notches because we're going to add a better or worse indicators to the aforementioned column stack charts. So you better strap in because your dopamine levels are about to go through the roof. Now, I have to make an admission. I almost never use stacked column charts. And that's not that I don't know when they're useful. The problem is that every chart that I use, I try to generate some sort of insight. So for example, when you look at a KPI, that's the best example. We're going to show the current value, and we're going to add a little bit of context. So here we're saying, well, let's compare this value to what happened last year. But also we're going to add a little bit more insight. We're going to color the variance so that if it's positive, then it's green. If it's negative, then it's red. So here our sales went down, so the year-over-year percent is red. Our profitability went up a little bit, or our average price went up a little bit. So we went from 520 to 554. Therefore, I'm going to color this number in green to indicate that things are getting better. This approach works very well in just about any chart. So for example, let's take a look at the sales trend. Here I'm trending my sales, and I'm doing exactly the same thing. Not only do I show what the current value of the sales was at that time, I'm also coloring in such a way that helps me understand that here sales are not favorable relative to last year, and here sales are favorable because they're in green relative to last year. Same thing is happening here. So I'm looking at my top 5 classes, which is not school classes, luckily or unfortunately, because we're looking at the retail example here. So these are my retail classes, big groupings of products. And what I'm showing here is the size of the bar is in dollars. Then we also have the margin, which is the second number. And we also color both the dollar and the margin value to show that numbers have changed, improved, or got worse relative to last year. So literally with every data point here, we have 4 points of information to bring a lot of insight into what's happening. Because a good dashboard is not the one that uses single color and that just look beautiful. A good dashboard is actionable. We want to make sure that with every data point on our dashboard, there is some insight, there is some action, there is something that makes me want to double click and investigate as to what's driving this number. Is it good or bad? So context is very important. Now, unfortunately, when you look into stack charts, and here you have an example of what looks like a stack chart, doing this is very difficult. So, and because I'm fairly limited with ability to generate additional insight or context for every data point, I almost never use it. Now, in this scenario, stack chart is extremely relevant. Why is that? Because we're looking at the retail data. In a retail world, what happens, sometimes I sell items or I sell my products at manufacturer recommended price, at regular price. But then if they don't sell after a while, I mark them down and I sell them at much cheaper price. So what you want to do is you want to sell as many products as high price as possible, which means that you want to have sold more regular product versus markdown products. So that mix of regular versus markdown is very insightful, right? So here I've created a chart where you can look at different districts, and you could see that some districts look better and some districts look worse. So I want to see as much blue and I want to see as little orange as possible. Now, what other piece of information I wanted to add is I wanted to do the same thing I do everywhere else. Every data point I want to compare to last year. So for example, here I see that this is my distribution of regular versus markdown, but I also want to know whether it's gotten better or worse. So here you see a bunch of red bubbles or red dots. They indicate to me that actually it's getting worse. So I'm selling more at markdown, except for one district, which is this one, where distribution has improved. And you can also see that as I click at different product categories, this distribution of red and green changes. And that actually tells me a bit of a story as to which district managers are doing better job pushing regular items and which ones are trying to promote and mark down items a little bit too aggressively. Now, if you think this chart is pretty cool, let me explain to you what I had to do to make it work. So the first thing that you need to know is that you cannot do this with a standard clustered chart. I've tried very hard to make it work and I just couldn't. So I resorted to a regular line and stacked column chart to achieve this functionality. How did I make it work? The first thing I had to do was to make it look like it's actually doing the distribution automatically. So instead of adding the sales in Markdown and unit sales to this chart, I had to create two calculations. The first one is regular unit share, and the second one is Markdown unit share percentage. So if you look at this calculation, it's trivial. I have my total units, I have my total Markdown sales units, I divide by the other, and that's going to give me the percentage of Markdown sales, and then I do the same for the regular unit sales. So now I have two percentage measures that will add up to 1, and that's exactly what's giving me this distribution. So that looks like I've created my stacked chart. And the next question is, what about to triple the amount of dopamine in your system? And that is, how the hell did I do these dots to appear? And that's what makes this super interesting. So let's see how this chart is set up. So as you find out, let me make myself a little bit smaller, or let me make this a little bit bigger. Here you go. So what we got is, we have our regular suspects, we have our chain and district name. These are the things that go into x-axis. We got our column measures, regular and Markdown. So you see them giving me a 100% stacked chart. And wait a minute, what is this? We have a line y-axis as well. And here I'm using the better or worse year-over-year calculation. Let's see what that looks like. So it turns out I am cheating a little bit. All I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, if sales actually has a value, then output 1. That's really all I'm doing. So basically what that's going to give me a line chart that's giving me 100%. So you can assume that there's a line chart going right here. So now the question is, okay, there's supposed to be a line chart line there. Why do I not see it? So let's examine how this thing is set up. So you see that I do have a line. It's supposed to be solid. In the color, I have, you can pick any color because what I've set is transparency to 0. So there is a line here, but because it's 100% transparent, we cannot see it. The next question is, okay, so how do we get the little bubbles and indicators to show up? Well, we're using the data labels feature, and the way to do this is we've written another measure, and the measure is, so you have to pick the right series. So I did the series for better or worse line. So I added a measure that I called circle. So the first thing, you need to have a measure that outputs a circle. Turns out it's trivial. All I do is a measure that outputs this little circle. And now I'm left with a simple task of coloring it green or red based on whether my distribution has gotten better or worse. So if I click on the function, you see that I've created, so I could just look at the regular unit share year over year. And I'm saying that if it's getting better, color it green. If it's gotten worse, color it red. And that's about all it takes. Now we have a chart that looks like a stack chart, 100% stack chart. However, it provides a lot of additional insight to us that normally is not available in a typical stack chart in Power BI. So just to give you yet another dopamine hit, we could see how clicking on different months and different periods, we see how things change. So this is a really good period where everything was doing well. And then we have worse periods when things are not doing so well. So you could kind of play with data and see which district managers are managing to sell things before having to mark them down, and which district managers either are struggling with demographics or something else is going on in their districts where they have to discount their items and put them on markdown more aggressively. So two things you should learn from this video. Number one, be very skeptical of all those how to build better dashboards in Power BI videos on YouTube, because a lot of them are done by graphics designers. They look pretty, they use just very few colors, but they're terrible in terms of storytelling, and they're even worse in terms of providing users insight. And they're even worse because they're not actionable at all. So don't be afraid of using colors if those colors are useful. Every chart that you have on your dashboard has to answer multiple questions. And not only does it need to answer the primary question, which in this case is a trend, but you need to create a context for every chart. So basically, there is a meaning and a context. So every data element, if you're going to put something on the dashboard, on your canvas, think about how to squeeze as much value out of it as possible, given the real estate constraints that you're facing with your design. So that's it for today, and I will see you back soon on the next one.